Good evening and welcome to NTD News. I'm Stephanie Cox. Here are today's top stories. After days of deliberating, the jury has reached its verdict on Kyle Rittenhouse. The 18-year-old walks away free after he's found not guilty on all charges. House Democrats today passed the $2 trillion social welfare and climate spending bill. McCarthy took over the House floor until 5 a.m. this morning with a record-breaking 8-hour speech to oppose the bill. A third COVID-19 shot is on the way. U.S. regulators just authorized booster shots for all American adults. We hear some responses. Austria going into full lockdown. It comes as the nation tries to tackle a new wave of infections, and the vaccine is going to be required for everyone in the country. How are residents responding? In the thick of preparing for the Winter Olympics, Beijing is suffering from a scandal exposed by a top Chinese athlete. The United Nations is concerned about her whereabouts, and an international tennis association is considering cutting business ties with China. A Kenosha jury gave its verdict for Kyle Rittenhouse, the 18-year-old who faced multiple murder charges. Rittenhouse had trouble keeping his balance as the jury acquitted him of every charge. NTD's Miguel Moreno has that moment.
As to the fifth count of the information Gage Grosskreutz, we the jury find the defendant Kyle H. Rittenhouse not guilty.
After days of deliberating, the jury gave its verdict. Kyle Rittenhouse was acquitted of all 5 charges. This is the end of a case that garnered the country's attention, a case tied to self-defense, guns, and Kenosha's riots in 2020. Attorney Kirk Everson of Everson & Richards tells me he's been an attorney for 21 years. He says the jury got the facts, not the corporate media narrative. But he takes issue with the prosecution for bringing this case forward.
The real job of a prosecutor, we entrust them with the discretion to evaluate these cases and to bring cases that are warranted. To be straightforward, the defense should never win if the prosecution isn't broken. Why would you prosecute a case that you can't prove? And to do so based on false narratives like we saw in this case, it's upsetting. We had even the President of the United States chime in and make some sort of statements indicating that somehow Kyle Rittenhouse could have been affiliated with white supremacy. If those facts existed, we would have heard those during the trial. This is why we have the jury system, because the court of public opinion is driven by those who control the narrative.
Reports say prosecutor Thomas Binger tried arguing that Rittenhouse was affiliated with the Proud Boys and white supremacist philosophies, but the judge rejected Binger's attempts. Director of Big Data Poll Rich Barris was a pollster for the defense's jury selection. Barris tells me he polled residents both in Kenosha and the state. He found that most people viewed Rittenhouse unfavorably, partly due to false media coverage. Barris tells me that in the end, the Rittenhouse legal team did not use his data to select a jury.
I want you to first of all give me your impression of the verdict. Yeah. What did you think?
You know, I got to tell you, I think Kyle Rittenhouse, the facts were overwhelming in his favor, but that doesn't always matter. Sadly, that's just the way our system is imperfect. But I think the jury did reach the right conclusion, and just judging from what I do, the dynamics of what happened in the jury there. It looked like there was about maybe one, if possible, a second holdout, but really one that had a problem. And typically these people can either, hang the jury or they can try to bring some others along with them. But in more than 90% of the cases, it ends up that holdout folds with the majority verdict. So that's what it looks like happened here.
In a statement to ABC, Prosecutor Binger said, "While we are disappointed with the verdict, it must be respected." Miguel Moreno, NTD News.
And the Wisconsin governor is calling for peace following the verdict. He says the community must move forward together and emphasizes the need for unity and healing. NTD's Grace Coulter has more on what the governor had to say.
Wisconsin Governor Tony Evers released a statement following the acquittal of Kyle Rittenhouse. The jury found 18-year-old Rittenhouse not guilty on all charges. Evers, a Democrat, said that no verdict will bring back the lives of Anthony Huber and Joseph Rosenbaum or heal Gage Grosskreutz injuries. He added that Wisconsin has work to do to ensure equity, accountability, and justice across the state. The governor echoed calls from local community leaders to keep any protests following the verdict peaceful. He said any efforts or action aimed at sowing division are unwelcome in the state and will only hinder healing. Evers has mobilized the National Guard to respond to any potential violence. As of 5 p.m. Eastern, there were no signs of protest outside the court in Kenosha. Grace Coulter, NTD News.
And President Biden has responded to Kyle Rittenhouse's acquittal. We hear his response and have an update on the president's first routine physical exam. Here are the details.
President Joe Biden said Friday that he stands by the jury's verdict in the Kyle Rittenhouse trial.
I stand by what the jury has concluded. The jury system works and we have to abide by it.
The jury found Rittenhouse not guilty on all charges. Biden made the comment upon returning to the White House from a checkup at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center. Once inside the White House, Biden expounded on his comments. In a statement, the president said, "While the verdict in Kenosha will leave many Americans feeling angry and concerned, myself included, we must acknowledge that the jury has spoken." Biden urged everyone to express their views peacefully, consistent with the rule of law. He said, "Violence and destruction of property have no place in our democracy." Biden says he spoke with Wisconsin Governor Tony Evers Friday afternoon, offering any assistance needed to ensure public safety. The president has faced criticism for a video he posted on Twitter in 2020 featuring Rittenhouse. Following the September 30th, 2020 presidential debate with former President Donald Trump, Biden wrote in a tweet, "There's no other way to put it. The President of the United States refused to disavow white supremacists on the debate stage last night." The video attached to the tweet included a photo of Rittenhouse holding an AR-15. His photo was displayed alongside white supremacists in Charlottesville, Virginia. Because of this, some have suggested Rittenhouse should sue Biden for defamation. Rittenhouse's mom said on Hannity last week that Biden defamed her son and claimed he did so for the votes.
And I was so angry for a while at him. And what he did to my son, he defamed him.
White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki was asked about Biden's tweet on Monday. She said she couldn't speak about anything related to the ongoing trial or Biden's past comments.
What I can reiterate for you is the president's view that we shouldn't have, broadly speaking, vigilantes patrolling our communities with assault weapons. We shouldn't have opportunists corrupting peaceful protests by rioting and burning down the communities they claim to represent.
In his statement Friday, Biden spoke on unity and said he remains committed to ensuring that every American is treated equally with fairness and dignity under the law. And as for Biden's health, upon returning to the White House, he told reporters that he feels great after his physical exam. Biden had to be put under anesthesia for a colonoscopy, so he temporarily transferred power to Vice President Kamala Harris. For 85 minutes, Harris was the first woman to assume presidential power. Biden, who turned 79 this Saturday, hasn't yet released the full report on his health.
The House this morning passed Biden's social welfare and climate spending package. And Biden and congressional Democrats doubled down, saying it's fully paid for. NTD's Melina Wisecup reports.
After long hours on the House floor, this Build Back Better bill did pass the House narrowly along party lines. And what held up the vote last night was House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy going on for a record-breaking speech, 8 hours and 30 minutes, speaking about his disapproval of such a bill. Let's listen.
You are spending so much money. Never before. We spent less defeating Hitler, Mussolini, and Japan. What we have before us isn't a social spending bill. It's a pathway to socialism.
Just one Democrat joined Republicans to oppose its passage, Representative Jared Golden from Maine. He says he's concerned about the trillions continuously being pumped into the economy and the plan benefiting the ultra-wealthy more than average Americans. But all other Democrats cheered for the success.
This bill is monumental. It's historic, It's transformative. It's bigger than anything we've ever done.
Pelosi says Biden called to congratulate them on getting it done. This bill comes right after Biden signed the historic infrastructure bill. So if this makes it to Biden's desk, it will be around $3 trillion in investments in Biden's first year. And Vice President Harris is confident it will.
And the president and I'll tell you, we are confident. And I just talked to him before I came to Ohio. We are confident that the Senate will do the same.
The Congressional Budget Office reports this bill adds more than $360 billion to the national deficit over the next 10 years. Some reports predict even more than that. But Democrats today double down on their messaging that this bill will be paid for through tax raises and other means. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
The Austrian government announced today that the whole country will go into full lockdown starting Monday. Officials made the decision as the country battles its fourth wave of infections. What's more, Austria is introducing a national vaccine mandate, the first in Europe. NTD's Kevin Hogan brings us more of the details and how some residents are reacting.
10 days. That's how long Austrian Chancellor Alexander Schallenberg said the country's virus lockdown will last, even for the vaccinated. Unless cases don't settle down, then it could be extended to 20 days. It's the latest effort to combat a recent outbreak with over 15,000 new infections reported in the country on Friday. It comes as a record-high wave of infections hits Europe. On top of the lockdown, the Austrian leader announced everyone in the country must be vaccinated.
Lange Zeit war es politischer Konsens, dass wir
For a long time, the political consensus was that we don't want a vaccine mandate in this country, but we have to look reality in the eye. For a long time, maybe too long, me and others thought that it must be possible to convince people in Austria, to convince them to get vaccinated voluntarily.
dass sie sich freiwillig impfen lassen.
The mandatory vaccination rule takes effect February 1st, and in the meantime, stores will close and cultural events are canceled. A doctor and former Austrian MP says no one can go to restaurants either.
The theaters, cinemas have to close down. All the haircutters, all the services, cosmetics, all these shops have to close. The only thing which is allowed is to go on the street for a stroll, to take a little bit of air, to make some exercise outdoors, but it is forbidden to have gatherings more than 25 people.
The country's health minister says schools and kindergartens will stay open, but parents are encouraged to keep their children home. And as Austria becomes the first country in Europe to make vaccinations compulsory, some residents are making the comparison to authoritarian times within the Soviet bloc.
And especially people who came to Austria from the former Eastern communistic countries like Slovakia, like Czech Republic, like Poland. We have a lot of doctors here from these countries and a lot of workers, and they all say this is very similar to the system which they fled from before 1989, before the wall in Berlin fell down.
Though some Austrians agree with the lockdown, and they also say the vaccine is important to control the spread and allege the subsequent waves came because the vaccine was administered too late. Kevin Hogan, NTD News.
A lot of companies are tightening their vaccine policies, firing people who refuse to get the shot. But Bank of America is taking a different approach. An unnamed source working for the bank told the Epoch Times that workers are being separated into two groups. He says unvaccinated workers in his Florida office are isolated on one floor and can't go anywhere else in the building. The source called the pilot program segregation. In a statement, Bank of America said that they don't mandate the vaccine and that they're taking steps to bring unvaccinated workers back into the office in a way that aligns with the CDC's guidelines. And booster shots are coming. U.S. regulators are opening up the third shot to all adults, but safety concerns remain.
We're encouraging every eligible American to get the extra protection a booster offers.
The CDC has given its endorsement and the FDA has given its authorization to booster shots for all Americans 18 and older. They cite a need to turn the tide of the pandemic as the holiday season hits. After the key regulatory step on Friday, eligible Americans can get booster shots of the Pfizer and Moderna vaccine as early as this weekend.
If it's been at least 2 months since you've had a Janssen vaccine, or at least 6 months since you've had the Pfizer or the Moderna vaccine, you can go get a booster vaccination.
An advisory panel previously pumped the brakes on the administration's push for widespread boosters for all age groups. They cited the risk of myocarditis or heart inflammation, especially in young men. But this time, the FDA chose not to consult its advisors, saying the booster's benefits outweigh the risks.
Myocarditis sounds like a scary word. It is, but myocarditis has a range from mild, which is basically something that is only almost a laboratory abnormality, to something that's really bad that you're in intensive care unit for.
The FDA says 98% of such cases are mild. But Dr. Peter McCullough, a renowned expert on the heart and kidneys, says it's concerning that they're ignoring expert opinions. His own research shows the risk of myocarditis actually extends up to age 50 in men.
It's concerning that the FDA has ignored the advice of external experts, who have a far greater degree of expertise than the FDA staffers.
And it's unclear whether the drive for a third shot will help or hurt people's confidence in the vaccine.
The whole impetus to have boosters is the fact that the vaccines have failed to control the pandemic.
Dr. Anthony Fauci has suggested that a third shot may no longer be a luxury, but part of the required regimen. But if that happens, Dr. McCullough says it will create further confusion over the meaning of fully vaccinated.
Because now it's unclear that if someone is considered vaccinated at one point in time, after a 6-month expiration, then they're considered unvaccinated.
This year, 2 lucky turkeys get to live out their natural lives without fear of the Thanksgiving holiday. President Biden today pardoned the 2 birds peanut butter and jelly. NTD's Allison Lee has more.
Power vested in me as President of the United States, I pardon you. I pardon you this Thanksgiving. Go ahead, say something.
The National Turkey Foundation selected these 2 lucky gobblers to receive presidential pardons ahead of Thanksgiving. Peanut butter and jelly both weigh about 40 pounds and come from Jasper, Indiana. They will soon be sent to the Animal Sciences Research and Education Farm at Purdue University in Indiana.
Peanut butter and jelly were selected based on their temperament, appearance, and I suspect vaccination status. No, is it? These 2 turkeys are getting boosted.
Presidential pardons of turkeys has a checkered history. It's rumored to go back to Abraham Lincoln when his son asked him to spare a turkey.
It's important to continue traditions like this, to remind us how from darkness there's light and hope and progress, and that's what this year's Thanksgiving, in my view, represents. So many of us will be gathering with our loved ones for the first time in a long time.
It didn't become a regular annual event until President George H.W. Bush embraced the tradition in 1989. Allison Lee, NTD News.
This year, Thanksgiving is going to cost a lot more than usual. Some people are having small gatherings anyway, and some say it's worth it no matter the price. NTD's Phil Zoe spoke to some shoppers preparing for the holiday.
Thanksgiving dinner is going to cost Americans 14% more than last year, according to the American Farm Bureau.
I've noticed that things were significantly more expensive than I expected them to be.
Was all set to spend a lot more, and then they have a big special at Whole Foods if you're Amazon Prime, so I'm going to be spending a lot less.
I don't pay attention to the prices of turkeys too often, so I wouldn't notice.
The average cost for a 10-person dinner went up to $53 this year compared to $47 last year.
First big Thanksgiving festival is tomorrow at a West Point football game. There's going to be like 300 cadets that we're going to try to feed, so that's one thing. Between 4 or 5 families, we're going to be at a tailgate for the football game tomorrow.
John Calhoun is visiting New York from Illinois for the holidays. He noticed many items getting more expensive.
Green bean casserole. You make green bean casserole, right? So to get canned green beans were significantly more than I expected them to be.
Shoppers can expect to pay around $1.50 more per pound for a turkey, which is up 24% compared to last year. Michael tells me that's all his coworkers are talking about.
Their Thanksgivings were becoming harder to prepare for because of the turkey shortage.
Natalie, who lives in New York, is planning a smaller get-together instead.
It's going to be very small, very socially distanced, very small pot of people, and unfortunately it's going to be a very big turkey, so there are going to be a lot of leftovers.
Even with prices up, people are thankful regardless.
Giving thanks that we're all still here.
Yes, we're paying a little bit more, but it'll eventually work itself out back to normal.
Phil Zhou, NTD News.
Coming up, a former professor was indicted on charges of wildfire arson. He was accused of starting multiple California fires while crews were fighting the Dixie Fire this year. And a California couple has allegedly gone on the run. The two were convicted of conspiring to swindle millions of COVID relief funds. That and more in just a moment. A former college professor was indicted for allegedly starting 4 wildfires in Northern California. The grand jury charged him for attempting to destroy federal property. We hear more from NTD's David Lamb.
According to the Department of Justice, a federal grand jury on Thursday indicted Gary Stephen Maynard, a 47-year-old man who lives in San Jose. The former criminal justice professor was charged for an arson spree near the Shasta, Trinity, and Lassen National Forests in Northern California, setting fires behind firefighters battling the historic Dixie Fire earlier this year. Court documents indicate that Maynard is charged with setting the following fires between July and August: the Cascade Fire, Everett Fire, Ranch Fire, and the Conard Fire. The fires, prosecutors said, threatened to trap firefighters. Court papers say that Maynard has denied setting the fires. If convicted, he faces up to 20 years in prison and a $250,000 fine for each count of arson. David Lamb, NTD News, California.
And a California couple has allegedly gone on the run after being convicted of conspiring to swindle millions in COVID relief funds. The two have been on the run for 3 months now, and the FBI is offering a reward for information leading to their arrest. We hear more from NTD's David Lamb.
A Southern California couple that swindled millions of dollars in COVID relief allegedly cut off their electronic bracelets and have gone missing, according to a Justice Department publication from Tuesday. Richard Ivazian and his wife, Marietta Terabellian, disappeared on August 29th. The Los Angeles couple conspired to obtain more than $20 million. The funds were meant for people and businesses impacted by COVID lockdowns. The two used the money to buy luxury homes and products. The FBI is offering up to $20,000 for information leading to their arrest. David Lamb, NTD News, California.
A California Superior Court overturned a San Francisco school board ruling. The board previously said that a top-ranked high school could not use a merit system to admit students. We hear more from NTD's Jason Blair.
In California, the state Superior Court ruled on November 18th to nullify the San Francisco Board of Education's decision to remove Lowell High School's merit-based system. The court found on Thursday that the school board violated the Brown Act by not providing enough information about the meeting agenda. According to U.S. News, Lowell High is currently the top high school in the San Francisco School District and number 78 nationwide. The school board previously voted on February 9th to remove the merit-based admission system. The board cited systemic racism. However, 3 of the school board members who voted to remove the merit system are now facing a recall election next year. The mayor has backed the recall. Jason Blair, NTD News, San Francisco.
Making a gingerbread house is a holiday tradition. For one chef, it has to be a life-size, 2-story high Victorian gingerbread house. NTD's Eileen Ang hears more from the professionals who put it together.
This is not your average size gingerbread house. It's built with thousands of gingerbread bricks and topped with tons of royal icing and candy decor.
Michael Quigley is the executive chef at Fairmont San Francisco. It's his first year supervising the gingerbread house.
So we had to start several months ago, back in July, and I had one person assigned to baking all the bricks because I wanted them all to look the same. If I had several different people baking them, they might not all look the same. This way they're all the same color, same size.
It's 22 feet high, 23 feet wide, and 10.5 feet deep. There's 7,750 pieces of gingerbread and 1,500 pounds of royal icing. This year, all of the candies are donated by See's Candies for its 100th anniversary. The candies are glued on with royal icing that dries hard. There are times when young children do come up to pick off the candy.
So I do have a little crew of elves that come through in the middle of the night to check and see if any candy has been taken off, and then we replace it as needed.
Engineers started building the wooden frame, which gets reused as a base so it's structurally sound. Then they paint and put up the animated decoration.
And it's actually a 12-month process really for us as far as making repairs to any of the wood that might not last the next year, procuring all the materials, all the wood, and all the new decorations that we're thinking about, setting up and then taking down several times to make sure everything's going to come up. And so when we do come up and put it in the lobby, that it can be pretty seamless and a pretty quick process.
Official assembly started in the lobby on November 1st. The culinary team spends about 375 hours creating the house. The engineering team spends 520 hours constructing the framework.
I do like the original device that I made. It's my little elf that pops out of the floor. We were trying to add some animation to it. That was on the second year. And they asked me if I could make something, and I was like, yeah, sure, I can make something. So I designed this little thing, and it pops up out of the floor and pops back down, and we've been using it for many years.
Walton has been working on the annual gingerbread house since the tradition first started 11 years ago. Seeing the kids' smiles keep him going.
Everybody that's involved does it really to make kids a little bit better Christmas. I mean, gets you somewhere to do, something to do, especially this year. Finding something to go do, it's really going to be difficult. And this will be a highlight for a lot of people.
It just, I love Christmas, and I think this just ties into me and Christmas and how much I love Christmas. This just puts a bow on it for me.
The hotel also offers gingerbread private dining, Santa suite package, holiday tea, and buffet dining.
The gingerbread house will be debuting on November 27th and will remain on display throughout the holiday season. Eileen Ang, NTD News, California.
The Butterfly Conservatory is returning to the American Museum of Natural History in Manhattan. When it reopens this coming Saturday, visitors will be able to witness more than 100 butterfly species fluttering around. NTD's Chenny Wu gives us a preview of the exhibit.
More than 500 butterflies color this exhibit at the American Museum of Natural History. This is the 23rd year the attraction will be featured at the museum. The butterflies are surrounded by blooming tropical flowers and lush green vegetation in 80-degree temperatures. They come from Florida, Kenya, Thailand, Malaysia, and Australia. And because the average lifespan of many butterflies is only 2 to 3 weeks, new butterflies are added continuously. The exhibit will be open from November 20th until May of next year. Tickets need to be purchased in advance and are selling fast. Chenny Wu, NTD News, New York.
And early this morning, the moon shone with a deep red glow during the longest partial lunar eclipse this century. More from NTD's Chenny Wu.
It was the longest partial lunar eclipse in almost 600 years, and it provided a rare spectacle in night skies over New York early Friday. The moon took on a reddish hue, which is why it's called a blood moon in a total eclipse. But even though this eclipse was partial, as much as 99% of the moon's disk was within the darkest part of the Earth's shadow. The eclipse lasted for around 3.5 hours and was visible in the United States, Japan, and Chile. According to NASA, there won't be a partial lunar eclipse that's longer until the year 2669. Chenny Wu, NTD News.
Coming up, Chinese e-commerce giant Alibaba's shares seeing a big drop today. This after the company reported its earnings for the most recent quarter. And the Uyghurs in Xinjiang are used by the Chinese Communist Party to test all sorts of social control measures, from facial and voice recognition to DNA collection. Now they're using AI to categorize people based on their emotions. More in just a moment here on NTD News.
Hello, I'm Mike Lindell, and I'm here to tell you about my new product from MyPillow, towels that actually work. Watch this absorbency test. Here's another towel that we randomly went out and bought. Here's one of my towels with the nice design. I don't know if you can see this, but you could line a swimming pool with this. This is crazy. Get rid of it. Towels that actually work.
The new MyPillow towels are exclusively made with 100% USA combed cotton with proprietary technology and with maximum absorbency. They dry you faster and are guaranteed to work.
I'm interrupting this commercial right now. Retailers have canceled MyPillow. And to thank you for all your support, I'm going to pass the savings directly on to you. Go to MyPillow.com to get deep discounts on all MyPillow products. For example, you get my dog beds for as low as $19.99. Or for a limited time, you can get my 6-piece towel sets, regularly $109.99, now only $39.99. The lowest price ever with your promo code.
Last Friday, this guy stole a package right off my porch. Or at least that's what would have happened if I didn't have my Vivint Smart Security System. Instead, this is what really happened. System detects package. Thief walks up. System scares thief. Thief runs away. If your doorbell can't do this, you need a Vivint Smart Security System. Call 844-544-0866 today.
90% of news outlets in the United States are controlled by 6 corporations. They're not out to tell you the truth of what's happening. They're out to tell you the picture of the world that they represent. The mission of the Epoch Times is to chase the truth, to ground all statements in facts, and prevent people from being misled. This is a battle between truth and deceit. Subscribe today and join the Americans who are seeking truth and tradition. We'd love to have you on board.
With 2.5 months till the Beijing Winter Olympics, a missing Chinese athlete is gaining international attention. The United Nations is backing her, and the Women's Tennis Association is considering whether to pull out of China. Some say Beijing is suffering by its own making. Here's more.
The UN Office for Human Rights requested information over the whereabouts of Chinese tennis star Peng Shuai on Friday. UN Human Rights spokesperson Liz Thorsell.
We would stress that it's important to know that she, where she is and her state, know about her well-being. And as I said, we think it would be important that there's an investigation into her allegations of sexual assault.
Former doubles world #1 Peng has not been seen or heard from publicly since she said on Chinese social media on November 2nd that former Vice Premier Zhang Gaoli coerced her into sex, and they later had an on-off consensual relationship. Neither Zhang or the Chinese government have commented on her allegation. Peng's social media post was quickly deleted, and the topic has been blocked from discussion on China's heavily censored internet. Concerns among the global tennis community and beyond has grown over Peng's safety. The Women's Tennis Association, or WTA, is calling for an investigation and said it was prepared to pull its tournaments worth tens of millions of dollars out of China over the issue. On Wednesday, WTA Chief Executive Steve Simon said he had received an email purporting to be from Peng and denying the allegations of sexual assault, but he cast doubt over the veracity of the email. A Chinese state media outlet also released the letter on Twitter. Hu Xijing, an influential Chinese state media editor, weighed in on the scandal on Twitter earlier on Friday, saying he does not believe Peng has been the target of retribution. Some of the world's top tennis players, including Naomi Osaka and Serena Williams, have tweeted #WhereIsPengShuai. The hashtag has racked up over 32 million mentions on Facebook's Instagram and Twitter, according to website Brand Mentions. Both platforms are blocked in China.
More bad news for Chinese e-commerce giant Alibaba. The company saw its shares drop after releasing its most recent earnings report.
China's biggest online shopping giant, Alibaba, saw its share dip down over 10% on Friday. That's after the company slashed its forecast for annual revenue growth earlier. Alibaba now expects year-on-year revenue to rise no more than 23%. That would mark the smallest gain since its stock market debut in 2014. It's also down from an earlier forecast of closer to 30%. The firm cited headwinds, including increased competition and China's crackdown on its big tech firms. Chief Executive Daniel Zhang said clothing and general merchandise were among the worst hit departments. Established players like Alibaba now have to contend with new entrants into e-commerce, including short video app Kuaishou. Such firms are benefiting from regulators' desire to see more competition. Alibaba has also had to rethink how it works amid increased scrutiny from watchdogs. Beijing has been tightening its grip on this tech giant, slapping an over $2 billion fine on the company over antitrust charges. Chinese authorities have urged firms to focus on what they call common prosperity, not sales growth. The term common prosperity could mean big companies in China will have to willingly sacrifice their wealth for the regime. For the most recent quarter, Alibaba reported revenue up 29%, its slowest gain in 6 quarters. Including the latest losses, its shares are now down 40% this year.
Beijing has achieved an unprecedented degree of control, especially in the Xinjiang region, over an ethnic group called Uyghurs. From cell phone numbers to DNA, the authorities have weaponized technology against the people.
The spread of Communist China's censorship and surveillance methods is sounding the alarm. The U.S. Congress held a hearing Wednesday to address the issue. In his opening remarks, Chairperson Senator Jeff Merkley described how China's communist regime uses technology in nefarious ways.
These technologies offer the government an unprecedented degree of control, enabled by the collection of massive amounts of data from cell phones, from personal computers, DNA, security cameras, and more.
The participants agreed George Orwell's 1984 is no longer science fiction, but today's China. They spoke about the many faces of Communist China's techno-authoritarianism.
The Great Firewall now prevents China's citizens from global engagement through one of the most extensive internet censorship systems the world has ever seen.
China's northwest province of Xinjiang is home to 12 million people of an ethnic minority. Most are Uyghurs. Tragically, they are suffering under the CCP's tightening control. Our story today will focus on Xinjiang. Jeffrey Kane was an investigative journalist in China and the author of the book The Perfect Police State. He interviewed 168 Uyghurs over 3.5 years. And his book documents many human rights abuse cases. Kane's previous visit to Xinjiang's capital lasted only 3 days. Then he was detained and asked to leave.
Since 2016, the People's Republic of China has engaged in an unprecedented experiment in social control in this region. It has deployed novel technologies in artificial intelligence, facial recognition, voice recognition, and biometric data collection to oppress its people in new and novel ways.
Kane says many of his interviewees mentioned something in common. That is, many Chinese high-tech companies, including Huawei, are working on innovations that are later used to exert psycho-torture on Chinese people.
When refugees and former camp detainees say psychological torture, they mean the feeling of constantly being watched, not by humans, but by crude software algorithms designed to predict future crimes and acts of terrorism with great inaccuracy.
Kane told us his interviewees were so scared that they would be flagged as potential criminals under the CCP's surveillance that they seemed to develop their own system of self-monitoring.
They trained themselves to become like machines or robots, able to answer every question from the police in a pre-programmed way, repressing their own feelings, thoughts, and desires in the process.
Some interviewees who had been detained said their fellow inmates in the Xinjiang concentration camp are suppressed to such an extent that they lack personalities and even expressions. They told Kane it was as if they had had a memory wipe. And Congressman Jim McGovern voiced concerns about forced labor in Xinjiang. He said audits in the region have been unreliable, making scrutiny on this issue dubious, and wondered if the surveillance is adding to the problem. Kane responded with a definitive yes.
There is a serious problem of extreme surveillance simply overpowering whatever audit function can exist within your typical multinational or American corporation that operates in the region of Xinjiang.
The CCP wants total control. A BBC report in May said the CCP is even using AI to detect the state of people's emotions, and they are testing the technology on Uyghurs.
Up next, the British government will now outlaw the Palestinian terrorist group Hamas in its entirety. Previously, Britain had banned only Hamas's military arm. And the French president is thinking about new pandemic restrictions as virus cases rise in the country. A French military officer compares the government's methods in promoting the vaccine to psychological warfare. Stay tuned for more here on NTD News. UK Home Secretary Priti Patel has announced an order to outlaw the Palestinian terrorist group Hamas in its entirety. It's a move that brings the UK's stance on Gaza's rulers in line with the US and the EU.
Until now, Britain had banned only Hamas's military arm. The government now sees the distinction between the military and the political wings as artificial. Under the order, it will be illegal to be a member of Hamas or invite support for the group, such as by flying their flag or arranging meetings for them. Israel welcomed the UK's decision, while Hamas condemned the move. Founded in 1987, Hamas opposes the existence of Israel and peace talks, instead advocating armed resistance. Patel is expected to present the change to Parliament next week.
Several countries in Europe are implementing new measures as they experience the latest wave of COVID infections. These range from limiting public venues to vaccinated people only to mandatory tests for workers. NTD's Eddie Aitken gives us an overview.
Chancellor Angela Merkel said on Thursday, Germany will limit large parts of public life in areas where hospitals are becoming dangerously full of COVID-19 patients to those who have either been vaccinated or have recovered from the illness. That includes access to public, cultural and sports events and to restaurants. On public transportation and at work, anyone who is not vaccinated must provide a negative test result. The acting health minister said on Friday stricter measures such as full lockdown, including for vaccinated people, might be needed.
So we are in a situation where, even if this produces a news alert again, we can't rule anything out. The only question is whether we shouldn't do much more to avoid getting into such situations and such decision-making.
In the Czech Republic from Monday, only vaccinated people or those who have recovered from infection will be allowed to go to restaurants or cultural and sports events. Companies are told to test unvaccinated workers regularly. In Slovakia from Monday, only vaccinated people will be allowed to events, restaurants, non-essential shops and shopping malls. In the worst affected areas, restaurants will only serve takeaway and facilities such as gyms will be closed. Meanwhile, Belgians have to work 4 days a week from home, and masks are mandatory indoors for all those aged 10 and over. COVID passes showing vaccination, negative tests or recent recovery are required inside cafes and restaurants. Eddie Aitken, NTD News.
Armies throughout the 20th century have used psychological warfare as one of their ways to break their enemies' morale. Now, a French military officer who's worked in intelligence services says the government is also using psychological warfare to promote the vaccine in France. NTD's David Vivas interviewed him.
France has reported over 20,000 CCP virus cases on Wednesday and Thursday. French President Emmanuel Macron is considering new measures in response. One of them is locking down unvaccinated people. A recent poll by Ilabé BFM TV says 6 out of 10 French citizens agree with it. But French Army Captain Alexandre Juvan-Brunet says if it were to be applied, the country might be even more divided.
Never has our country been so divided between vaccinated and unvaccinated people.
Juvan-Brunet created an association to inform people on their rights. It now has 5,000 followers. He says the government uses the same methods to promote the COVID-19 vaccine as the French Army intelligence services did in psychological warfare.
A vaccine mandate is illegal and against the Constitution, so they are forced to do it this way. Psychological warfare, or the manufacturing of consent, is using methods such as inducing people to get the vaccine with a vaccine pass. This would ban people from going to certain places, such as restaurants, entertainment venues.
Though around 70% of the nation is fully vaccinated, French media outlets are warning against a fifth wave of the pandemic. Juvan-Brunet says this causes misunderstanding. People will question the vaccine's efficacy and the restrictive measures put in place.
There are different methods in psychological warfare, such as making people scared or telling them different information that contradict with each other. If you're not getting the vaccine, some things are taken away from you, such as your liberties. We give you something, we take it back. So this creates a mental state where you are dependent and vulnerable.
The captain also says that the French military and the US military used these methods in the 20th century, and later on companies also applied the same tactics in their commercials.
In this warfare, you win the battle when people comply with your decision and when their mental well-being is destroyed.
Some authors have called this psychological warfare the manufacturing of consent. Jovan Brunet says the government and the vaccine makers now use it to promote the vaccine. David Vives, NTD News.
The Belarus border crisis threatens to spiral into a major East-West confrontation as NATO's leader underlines the seriousness of the situation and his support for the NATO member states that border Belarus. Poland says Minsk changed tack this week, clearing migrant camps on Thursday and then shipping those migrants back to the border to cross illegally today. NTD's David English brings us this report.
The NATO Secretary General on Friday said the situation on the Belarus-Poland border is a security challenge and that the alliance stands with Poland, Lithuania and Latvia.
What we see is that the Lukashenko regime is using vulnerable people as a tool to put pressure on other countries.
Jens Stoltenberg said positive steps have been taken, including Iraq stopping flights taking migrants to Minsk. Poland's president thanked Stoltenberg for NATO's support during a visit to North Macedonia.
We hope that soon, thanks to the political support from the European Union and NATO, the attack will end and the Belarusian authorities will stop with the attack on the Polish borders.
On Friday, Poland accused Belarus of trucking hundreds of migrants back to the border and forcing them to cross. This came after Belarus authorities cleared migrant camps on Thursday, where thousands had been waiting to go to Europe. British Defence Secretary Ben Wallace visited his Polish counterpart on Thursday. Wallace said Britain stands shoulder to shoulder with Poland as old friends and partners.
Because make no mistake, what's happening on the Belarus border is a deliberate and concerted attempt to destabilise not only Poland, but some of the other neighbouring countries like Latvia, etc., to make sure that Europe is weaker in order to further other people's agendas.
Wallace called on Belarus to stop flying in migrants from the Middle East. The Polish Minister of Defence said British military engineers will soon come to Poland to help build a temporary fence at the border. David English, NTD News.
Up next, Japanese baseball fans are celebrating after one of their own is chosen as MVP. Shohei Ohtani was unanimously voted the 2021 American League Most Valuable Player. And NTD visited a luxury goods exhibition in London displaying over 200 works of a renowned Russian goldsmith. We bring you the highlights and more here on NTD News.
You worked hard for your money. You invest in stability for your retirement and your family's future, to build and leave them with something greater. The next unprecedented financial crisis, political misstep, or unstable government can depreciate it all away. It was called the gold standard for a reason, the financial preservation of tomorrow. Diversify your assets against inflation, market volatility, and the unknown with real money. Hedge your wealth with the purest form of money, physical gold and silver. Because any currency printed on paper can be manipulated. What's backing up your IRA? Do what you need to do right now to be prepared with the Reagan Gold Group. Visit now, rggusakit.com, or call us at 866-912-1384. Receive up to $2,500 in free silver coins and a free safe with your new precious metals IRA. Call now.
Shohei Ohtani was unanimously voted as this year's most valuable player in Major League Baseball's American League. Fans in Japan are celebrating the achievement of one of their own. NTD's Chen Wu has more.
Baseball fans in Japan are delighted after Japanese MLB star Shohei Ohtani won the American League's Most Valuable Player award on Thursday. Office workers in front of the city's Shimbasi station were rushing to pick up special editions of Friday morning's newspaper reporting on the historic achievement by a Japanese baseball player. Elsewhere in the capital, people lined up in front of a special pop-up store to buy Ohtani-themed merchandise. About 3 weeks ago, a Japanese company set up the store in a Tokyo shopping mall, hoping that Ohtani would be the MVP. On Friday, a congratulatory banner was set up in the store in response to Ohtani's MVP victory. Ohtani was the unanimous winner of the American League's top honor for hitting and pitching displays not seen since Babe Ruth. Ohtani received all 30 first-place votes and 420 points in balloting by members of the Baseball Writers Association of America. Chen Wu, NTD News.
And finally, the largest collection of Carl Fabergé's Imperial Easter eggs in a generation goes on display in London tomorrow. The exhibition tells the story of his life as a master goldsmith, his company's exquisite work, and his deep connection to London. NTD's Neil Woodrow brings us a preview of the exhibition.
Here at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London is an exhibition that focuses on Carl Fabergé, his work and legacy. 3 of his legendary Imperial Easter eggs are on display for the first time in the UK. The exhibition is called Fabergé in London, Romance to Revolution. Saturday sees the opening of the first major exhibition devoted to renowned Russian goldsmith Carl Fabergé. Over 200 objects showcase the man. Curator Hannah Farby says Fabergé's fame was boosted by his work for the Russian royal family.
And the piece next to me is a copy of the Imperial Romanov regalia, or parts of the Imperial Romanov regalia, the large crown, the small crown, the scepter and the orb. And this piece really demonstrates the very close relationship that Fabergé enjoyed and the patronage that he enjoyed from Nicholas II, the Emperor of Russia, and how he was allowed to create this piece, copy this piece, and to exhibit it in Paris at the 1900 exhibition, where he realized that there was a great appetite for his works outside of the Russian Empire.
In 1903, he opened in London his only shop outside Russia. Royalty, aristocrats, exiled dukes, maharajas and socialites flocked there to buy gifts of unparalleled luxury. Fabergé's works were as popular in Britain as they were in Russia. King Edward VII and Queen Alexandra were avid collectors. The king commissioned several items, including a silver model of his favourite racehorse. The exhibition ends by celebrating the legacy of Fabergé with 15 iconic imperial eggs, the largest collection on public display for over 25 years. Among them, the Alexander Palace egg features watercolour portraits of the royal children and a surprise model of the palace inside. The Romanov tercentenary egg celebrates 300 years of the Romanov dynasty, and the winter egg of 1913 holds poetic surprise.
So if you imagine this glass, this rock crystal glass that is frosted with sort of a design of frost flowers that we get on our windows in winter time, and that were the inspiration for this, and the diamonds that are sort of dazzled across the surface of this rock crystal. It's a symbol really of the harsh winter, but within this egg, when it opens, you get this little delicate basket of spring flowers, this delicate hope.
It's not just about unique and exquisitely crafted eggs. There's more to the Fabergé story. Neil Woodrow, NTD News, London.
And that's all for today's news. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Stephanie Cox.
Thanks for watching us on YouTube. Did you know YouTube only keeps selective videos on its platform? So if you want to make sure you get the full picture, just subscribe to our newsletter. Go to newsletter.ntd.com and sign up. It's free.